when I was at art college, it was like we literally, I think there's a guy called Manzoni who just canned his own shit. It's part of the agenda is to destroy our affinity with the divine, with beauty, with truth. Post-impressionists, everything pretty much after that is just Emperor's New Clothes. It's just bullshit. So the modern art scene now is just art has become like almost like a crypto. It's a currency. He was getting the Greta Thunberg indoctrination age 6, and they were just starting with the gender thing age 6. Well, it's child abuse. It is child abuse.
Hello and welcome back to the Resistance podcast. I'm here today with Jake Fern. Jake, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm Jake Fern. I'm a painter and a singer. We're here today for the HOPE Music Festival, and Raw Milk are playing in a minute, which we'll be looking forward to. We're playing on Sunday and a load of other good stuff.
What do you think is so special about being down here at HOPE?
Well, you teach our son here, which is probably the most special thing, obviously Will and Laura. Yeah. Apart from that very special thing, that is you and Laura, HOPE is just this kind of hub of open-minded people, and they're providing a beautiful space for children to come and learn in a non-indoctrinational way. And Sadie and Matt and Andy and Katie Jo and everyone else are just doing a fantastic job. It's wonderful here. It's quite far for us to come, and we actually put off coming for maybe 18 months, and Rachel was like, just come to keep, she kept going on, come to HOPE. It's like, it's an hour's drive, it's 2 hours a day, it's too much. And then when we came, eventually we decided to do it, and Mackie loved it so much. He genuinely does really love your and Laura's lessons. And yeah, it's just fantastic. And again, HOPE, it's all volunteers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously they're getting paid to teach, which is absolutely the way it should be, but the space is created on a volunteer basis, and it's amazing, and people put a lot of work in, and the festival has a really good vibe.
You are a painter. Do you want to talk a little bit about the art that you're displaying down here at HOPE Sussex?
Well, I started off I'm a portrait painter, and then I was working for a forger, legal forging mostly. And we became friends, and he is on a similar page, and we started doing our own kind of take on some of the forgeries that we were doing. So he came up with the name of the Righteous Brothers. So it's pretty obvious what. But so we started doing sort of like book cover, mock-up book covers, sort of vintage style book covers with sort of politically incorrect messages on them, and they look quite striking. So here we've got the Righteous Brothers and my own personal pretty portraits and landscapes.
And what sort of things did you put on the book covers, Garner? So
the first one was, let's do something about Sadiq Khan. So I was just scrolling through, I can't remember what I was searching, Google Images I was going through, and I came across this book cover called, and it was a proper book, like a sort of throwaway 70s, what do they call them, dime store, called The Car Thief. And it was just very striking with a beautiful font, and it just looked really visually it was very striking. So I just thought, well, just swap his face out. So it was this 70s guy sort of like leaning against this parking meter looking cool, and then we just put Sadiq's face on it. That was the first one, and then the whole series just went on from that. So with the same font, the same title, Righteous Brothers, and then a different. So we've got Just Stop Being Useful Idiots, and then it's a whole sort of like a film poster style montage of Soros and some guy with a tarmac glued to his hand and that kind of thing. And then we've got it's a triptych actually. There's three, which are we got Sadiq Khan, the car thief. Then we've got Blade Runners. It's like a homage to the Blade Runners, and then we've got the third one, which is and then they said no. and it's just a picture of a collapsed lamppost with a camera on it in a sort of desolate kind of cityscape. So that's the 3. So yeah, and then we've got posters of them and cards ranging from £2 to £15,000.
And how much is the carpet thief? How much?
The original big canvas, they're 6 foot by 4 foot, I think. So that's 15,000.
Okay, so guys, if you want to donate to our Patreon, currently we're making £130 a month, which is not very much at all. If you'd like to donate enough for us to be able to afford this, we would actually start using it as the backdrop for
that's a good idea.
our
definitely,
podcast.
Definitely
So
do that.
if you do want to make it happen, I know it's not likely, but anyway, do support our journalism. But yeah, I think they're absolutely lovely.
Yeah, thanks.
And I like some of the portraits that you've been doing as well.
That's my bread and butter. So,
do you want to explain what you've been doing recently with your portraits, with the interviews?
So, my wife came up with the idea. So we were sort of brainstorming where to take it. So I've been doing portrait commissions, in the pub, but we wanted to sort of take it somewhere else. And she said, well, you love talking about what's going on in the world. You love talking with interesting people, and you like having deep conversations, and you like doing painting. So just bring them together and you can do a portrait demonstration whilst talking. So the first one was the pilot sort of trial one was with Mad Mick, and we shortened 5 hours down to just over an hour. We've got David Icke lined up in November. We've got Matt Letizia. We've got, I think, Kate Shimmerani said yes. Who else? We've got Jackie Devoy, Naeem Mahmood, Richard Vobes.
I like the one you did of Lawrence Fox. That was really good. I was wondering if you sat down with him, but you've just done that based off of the image.
Yeah, I just found a nice image, and because at that point, I did that a couple of years ago, and I thought if I did a few of the figures and then just sent them out, but I couldn't get it to him. But maybe now he'll sit in person. I think the sky's the limit, really. I think because it's quite an interesting. Like, I know obviously you're a proper interviewer. I'm not an interviewer, but that kind of meditative, you got 4 hours sitting with someone, you don't have to try very hard. Because actually I found it surprisingly difficult to really engage conversationally. It surprised me because when I paint, I listen to podcasts and I listen to stuff and I can take it in. It's a different part of the brain. And Vicky was saying the same when she's working. You can listen and you just sort of go into a kind of meditation. But when someone's actually coming back and you wanting to engage, then it does engage a different part of the brain. So I did sort of struggle a little bit with Mick, but luckily he talks so much that it was very easy, But I did realise that it's not as simple as you think to actually have a proper conversation, because I like to really think about what people are saying and kind of respond to it. Not I don't want to just have a generic sort of. But I think the format of it being sort of four, it'll be about 4 hours. Mick was super long because we just kept going. I should really limit it for about 4 hours, but that just gives a kind of real space. So it's like you don't almost have to ask questions, And if you're editing that down to about 45 minutes, you sort of draw stuff. You can imagine if you were doing an interview and you didn't have the time limit, and you were doing something else, like you were gardening or something. You imagine what kind of stuff would come up. That wouldn't come up.
Chat that you flow into as you're doing things.
Yeah.
I think that's why they do sort of interviews where people are eating like different chilies and whatnot.
Yeah, because it breaks the thing. It breaks the kind of spell, doesn't it? I mean, as soon as you sit in this chair, I mean, my heart sort of, you feel your heart rate go up slightly because it's an unusual situation.
Yeah.
So obviously, I know you well, and so it's nothing intimidating, but it just you're in an unusual situation, and until you start really sort of engaging, it is that, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about?
Yeah.
So I think it kind of breaks that spell almost, because you're just doing something, and you can have long periods of silence, and there's like, I could just sit here now for 10 minutes, it wouldn't be very interesting. But if if I was sitting here for 4 hours, I could sit here for 10 minutes and not say anything, it wouldn't matter, and then it all gets edited. So I think it'll draw things out of people. Like Mick's one was we got very personal, so he was telling a lot of personal stories about, his drug use and all this kind of stuff, family stuff. And, yeah, so who knows what it'll bring out.
You're going to put me out of a job. I'm going to have
Yeah,
nothing
definitely.
left.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to be broke, penniless.
You already are, so.
Well, that's true. So how did you get so good at being an artist then?
Lockdown. Alhamdulillah. Lockdown, one of the gift that keeps on giving. So I always painted from like an early age. I always loved drawing and painting. And then I went to art college, and then art college stopped me from drawing and painting because art college is part of the, modern, I mean, this is still going back like 25 years or whatever, but even then it was captured by the kind of cultural Marxist, agenda, and destroyed so many people's creative desires and sense of beauty and truth, and all that. You couldn't talk about that kind of stuff. I did a conceptual art course.
So because I know that they got rid of a lot of the realist painters.
Yeah.
So what they've done is they've essentially segmented everything by time period in a lot of the university art courses.
Right.
So you get to all about around the end of the Victorian era, and they go, okay, and now they're doing sort of impressionism.
Yeah.
And then all of the realist painters who come after that, they're just
ignored.
ignored.
Completely ignored.
Have you heard of Bourgeois? Or
is this going back like
yeah. It was a contemporary of Monet. Yeah, because Monet, I think it was Monet who said about him that
he
would
kind of
be
like chocolate box, really sweet kind of. Incredible talent, but I think that's quite
beautiful. I mean, the way that he does, it's the fingers that get me. It's the fingers because they're so perfectly lifelike.
Yeah.
It's the height of realism, and
he
is one of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
And I just stumbled across him one day. I saw one painting and went, who the hell is this by?
Is that the girl? Was it the girl in a shawl? There's one that particularly well known.
Do you know what? I don't think it was. I think he did, and I may be completely wrong here, but I think he did a version of the Birth of Venus.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it was from that I went, those fingers, the way he's captured that perfectly. That's amazing. I want to see his other stuff, and he does a lot of different shepherdesses.
Yeah, that's it.
That's his real thing. I thought this is absolutely amazing, and I thought, why have I never heard of him?
Yeah.
Why is this being ignored?
No, completely unfashionable, dismissed, cheesy. All this kind of stuff. It's just
Some of the best realist painters have been completely ignored. It's been completely cast to the wayside, even though these people were considered the pinnacle of their time.
Mm-hmm.
They've just been they're nothing. And I think it's just disgusting considering how good they were. I found a blog online, and it was from a guy who studied, I think he had a master's, and then he was now a teacher of art history or something. And he was walking around a little known museum in the United States somewhere, in one of the lesser, when I say lesser states, one of the less fashionable states. And he saw this painting, he went, oh wow. And it was a Bourgeois.
Okay,
And he just couldn't fit it in. He knew all of this. He should know everything about this. And he blank. Right? He started looking.
I think I've seen him interviewed. It's like a sort of small private museum in a kind of lesser, not the New York metro, they've got some of his. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
I think it's Bourgeois, but I'm not 100% sure.
But anyway, I know I've seen.
Stop being French if you want us to pronounce your name properly.
Yeah. But it's true. All that's kind of dismissed by when I was at art college, it was like we literally, I think there was a guy called Manzoni who just canned his own shit. And, that was like, what we studied. It's like sort of role models,
I studied loads of shit.
Yeah, literally. And, so essentially, it's part of the agenda is to destroy our affinity with the divine, with beauty, with truth, and the whole conceptual art. Basically, that was from around, like you say, impressionist, post-impressionist. Everything pretty much after that is just Emperor's New Clothes. It's just bullshit. So the modern art scene now is just art has become like almost like a crypto. It's a currency which is based simply on confidence in the market.
Yeah.
So I googled it. The most valuable. Some guy sells paintings for a couple of million. I had not heard of him before, but they. I mean, they are. I'm looking at that wall, and then that like someone's just on the wall. Someone's just painted some leaves. Like they're fine, but that's the kind of thing he does. He paints stuff like that, and they go for 2 million, and that's where we're at. It's only because someone says it's worth 2 million, it's worth 2 million.
Is it not all just essentially a scam and some sort of money laundering?
I think there's a lot of money. I think there's a lot of money laundering. I don't think it's a scam so much as simply it is like a currency. It's just become its own currency, so that's okay. Like the £50 note is only worth £50 note because we have a shared understanding that it's worth £50. It's the same as a painting worth £2 million. It's only worth that because you can sell it for 2 million.
But it can be debased, and this is the thing. I think
some of them do. They do. Yeah, it's up and down. Yeah.
This is one of the things because the government is always printing money because they're always printing money and debasing our money. That means that rich people who have a lot of money, they might only have 10 grand in the bank, but they've got tens of millions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So the percentage of their wealth that gets deflated is nothing to them. Whereas the average person who maybe some people don't have mortgages. A lot of people don't have mortgages. So if you've not got mortgage at all and you're just renting, all your wealth is in cash because you're trying to save up for a deposit, and it's all getting inflated away.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas rich people just put all into assets, steadily increased in value.
A lot of it's in trusts, isn't it? So they don't own anything,
and it's prestige
and
as
they're
well.
Happy.
And it's their connections.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely. Yeah.
They. I think they really do own it, but they. Well, it's just an excuse for them.
Yeah, they don't own it on paper. A lot of it. Yeah.
On Thursday, 26th of September, at Finsbury Park's Night Owl, doors open 5:30. We've got our first ever podcast in front of a live audience with Graham Moore, English constitutional expert. So come down, it's going to be a great night, and we've got a live band, Freedom Band, playing afterwards, and there are going to be lots of Freedom people there. So please do come down. Thursday, 26th of September.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's a new competition that was set up, actually, in the last 5-10 years for realist painters, which is trying to bring back realism.
Yeah, I showed one of my paintings, which is here at the Royal Society of Portrait Painters, and that was at the Mall Gallery in London. So it's it's a lovely gallery, it's quite. And we went there, and it was great because it was all realist, it was portraits. Most of them were kind of, realistic. As if there wasn't, a few abstract kind of looking. But it was just a breath of fresh air because that. And people would come in and the public can appreciate that. Whereas the public come into like White Cube or whatever, some I don't even follow modern contemporary art now, but your average sort of member of public comes in, they haven't got a clue what they're looking at, and they spend more time reading the description than looking at the art because it's dead. There's nothing there. It's got no meaning in it. So they have to read it secondhand, and then they can tell their friends, "Oh, I saw this, and it means this," and blah blah blah.
That's the location where people are being funneled. So people being funneled to this, and they're told, "Oh, you're dumb if you don't understand this. You're dumb if you don't like it." It's sort of a Emperor's New Clothes situation.
It's totally the Emperor's New Clothes, yeah. And who spoke out? The little boy, didn't he? He said, "Oh, the king's naked," or whatever, And in a way, the people in the movement, we're all like that little boy, aren't we? Because we don't give a shit. We'll say what we see, and that's the difference. We might get things wrong, and we have disagreements about flat Earth, whatever it is. But that's okay. We can talk about it. But, essentially, the thing that we've got in common is that we point out, no, I'm not buying that. I don't believe that. I'm not convinced by that.
Yeah, I'm not conforming to your system. I believe in my freedom and the freedom of everyone else. So I just want to live my life, and I can have my preferences.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of people are sort of caught in a bubble, and I don't want to say deprived, because I think it is the parents' role to educate their children. But I think a lot of people are cut out of an access to beautiful art beautiful architecture, because they're not given an ability to learn about it. They're not given
Yeah.
an ability to study it, because they say you have to tick this box. This is the consensus. The same as you see it in just about all fields. You see it in science, right? Pseudoscience. You see it in pseudo archaeology with all the stuff that's happened to Graham Hancock when he points out, okay, well these blocks, like, we can't lift blocks this big. How did the ancients do it? What's going on there? Why are there all of these relics from over 10,000 years ago? Well,
yeah. Well, it's what So going back to why do some people question it and some people don't?
yeah,
That's the question that we keep asking over and over again, isn't it? Really.
yeah.
Over the last 4 years, why do some people smell a rat and others don't? And I think my conclusion generally is that it's all down to it's not an intellectual thing at all. In the movement, there's people who never left school when they're 15. They're not particularly they're smart, but they're not. And then you've got Oxbridge graduates all hanging out. That's what I absolutely love about what we do. Is you've got such a mix. It's the only, you go on a march in London for, a kind of conventional march, whether it's Palestine or whatever, and you get a certain kind of person, whether it's, LGBT rights or whatever, you get a certain kind of person, whether it's this, you get a certain, with our lot, it's just, you would never know. Who are these people?
There's actual diversity.
Yeah, real diversity. The only slight caveat to that, I would say, is that young people are slightly less represented. It does tend to be 40 and yourself obviously exception, but generally it does tend to be more slightly older people. I think that's because the youth are more subject to the conditioning.
That's because people give away their kids, which is something that you're not.
Yeah,
doing.
exactly. Yeah.
So you're actually making sure that your son isn't being indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Apart from me, sneakily.
Yeah, well, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Well, when he comes back and he starts saying, okay, we need to restore the empire.
Can I have a cigarette, please, Father? Will is so cool when he's smoking his cigarette.
He hasn't said that.
No, he hasn't said that.
Good.
No, he hasn't said that. But at the same time, I totally get why people can't do that. I don't want to come across as smug, because we're very lucky that we're both self-employed, that we have a chance to do home education. It is almost impossible for a lot of people, financially, and the system has been set up that way, as we know, to make it financially almost impossible, that we need two incomes to support a family.
That's the thing. The thing is, it is financially extremely difficult for a lot of people. Okay, and just living is financially extremely difficult for a lot of people, because obviously mass migration, okay, massive increase in demand. This is what I teach in economics, right? The inelastic supply. The price of housing goes through the roof. So everyone's becoming a rent slave, more or less. However, what price can you put on not having your child brainwashed? And what price can you put on having your values pass to the next generation?
It's about £9,000 a year. We worked it out.
This is the question.
Yeah.
I think, though, to be honest, it depends. It depends what you go for.
Yeah.
Like how involved you are personally, how much you decide to get in tutors.
Yeah.
But for the money that people spend in the state schools, you can do it for the amount of money that they would have been spending.
Yeah, there's usually ways of doing it if you really believe that it's the right thing. But having said that, again, COVID, the gift that keeps on giving. We had Mackie in school up until COVID. We'd thought about home edding, and we hadn't done it. And then COVID came, and we were like, no, he's not going back, because that was a private school. So that was a Montessori school, which we thought would be more sort of.
How much was that?
We were getting a deal. Yeah,
Okay.
but you I think it was about £1.5 grand a term.
Well, that's reasonable.
Yeah. So yeah, but the point being, I get why it's difficult for people.
I do get,
especially single parents, and all that kind of.
But the connection that gives you with your child as well, the fact that you can connect with them and you can be part of their lives more so than just having them come back and say, "Oh, we're all evil because we're whites." And
Well, he was getting that, not the white thing, but he was getting the Greta Thunberg indoctrination age 6, and they were just starting with the gender thing age 6. And that was just when COVID hit, so we were like feeling a bit uneasy, and then that gave us the excuse to pull him out.
What sort of things did he come back with?
Well, his teacher was telling him that he should look up to Greta Thunberg because he was taking the piss, basically. When him and his mate were taking the piss out of Greta Thunberg. He knew enough at that point, sort of, to be skeptical of the whole green thing. And and then they had a book that was kind of gender stuff that it was, being talked about at 6 years old. Like just leave it for now.
Yeah,
even if you believe in it, just leave it for now. It's not.
It's just messed up. We're always very clear with the kids. These are facts.
Yeah.
Human beings have sex, not gender.
Yeah.
Gender's for words, and those words that we use, pronouns, are representations of sex when applied to humans. That's how it's always been done. That's how it's always going to be done.
Yeah.
And the kids appreciate it because it just gives them certainty. It's like, this is how it is, right? We're not going to change things. We're not going to make you pony up and play some sort of weird popularity contest in order to gain some TikTok approval or something. I think it's mad.
Well, it's child abuse. It is child abuse. The whole thing. One, I mean, we grew up, not you, perhaps we're similar age, but with the Cold War, threat of nuclear war. If a car alarm went off when I was 12, I'd be like my pants. I thought the nuclear Armageddon was, and now with COVID, particularly with the climate crisis, that's what kids are being scared to death about. So it's I did think they're abusing kids in the state school system.
I remember when I was a kid, we were learning about something, how like all the trees were going to be gone. Like there were going to be no trees. And therefore, the trees made all the oxygen, not the algae, which actually in the sea make most of the oxygen. And therefore, we were all going to choke to death. No oxygen.
Asphyxiate.
Just the last human there, frantically trying to plant a tree. Didn't mention at all that CO2 was plant food. They could have mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah, that probably wasn't even the thing then.
Yeah,
CO2.
They don't like you. Questioning things.
No.
I remember everything getting pushed. I recently interviewed a boy who was talking about how he was having Christianity was barely covered, right? Which I'm a complete atheist. I don't believe in any religion, but Christianity was barely covered. I just think from a historical perspective, no, you have to. Really?
What are you talking about in history in school or something?
It was about a 16-year-old boy that I interviewed at a Tommy Robinson thing.
Right.
And he was saying, we've barely covered Christianity, and which is historically very important to cover. So even if you're a complete atheist, you must understand. Yeah, you have to understand the involvement of Christianity just from a historical perspective, if not from a literary perspective or anything else. Right? He said instead they're just pushing Islam, and the rest of the religions. And just saying, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. It's like, well, wait a second. What about some criticism of it? You can't just push these religious ideologies, but it's all part of the indoctrination. I just think it's bad. And then when he started saying, criticisms of Islam, they suspended him.
Oh, really?
They suspended him and branded him a racist, the teachers.
Right, okay.
Which is
a 16-year-old boy, he was suspended from school?
Yeah, that's what he told me when I interviewed him.
Okay.
It's mad. And
I might have seen it. Was that a while back, actually?
No, that was quite recent. By the time this comes out, who knows?
Yeah, maybe I haven't seen it.
But it's we've even had some kids here who've been in state schools, and we have to de-radicalize some of the kids from this ideology of believing that they can change their sex, which is a mental illness. It's like they've actually been giving these kids mental illness.
You used a good word, I think, certainty, or what was the word you used?
I think certainty. Consistency.
Because that's what children desperately need. They don't want too many choices. You get the extreme, they get the opposite, perhaps. Also, we know people in the kind of movement who unschool, and that can be its own sort of, there's own dangers involved in that, because the children do need sort of boundaries. They do need, they don't want complete freedom of choice because it's too much. They're not ready for it.
Yeah, because children only have a certain amount of autonomy. I was talking about this with one of the other guests.
Yeah.
And he was saying that you need more freedom in education. I think you need a sort of balance. Like kids need a certain amount of freedom, but where they're given some options and things are structured for them in order to choose where they want to go. And there are some kids who are completely driven. Like I know some people use the Ron Paul curriculum online where the kid takes over, they work more or less completely independently. But then again, on the flip side, you don't have as much involvement, you don't have as much oversight, and it relies on them doing all of the work themselves. And it's not personal. You don't have that interaction.
Well, I like, you do trivium here, and that the classical education, for me, is essentially critical thinking. So it's teaching children how to think, not what to think, at the right age, though. Yeah. So that there's a point, sort of. There's a point of developmentally where they just want, we all seen kids like watching cars and they learn all the different makes of the cars, or they know all the football team names. They love lists at a certain age. They just want facts.
Well, that's the grammar, because it's grammar, logic, that's rhetoric. I know some people flip around the order, but the grammar.
Well, you can be sort of flexible depending on the child's development and
But the basic grammar stage is these are the rules of grammar. Understand these rules, understand the system. This is the certainty. Once you can just understand, identify these words and know how to put together a sentence, then you can start making arguments. You can start looking at and picking apart other people's arguments. But that doesn't mean
for those listening, it doesn't necessarily mean grammar, like English grammar. Grammar within the trivium just means the base facts of any subject, doesn't it? So you can apply that to say science or whatever. So science, you just learn the fundamental facts that you would call that the grammar stage, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we focus mainly on English grammar within the trivium, but the grammar stage applies to just about everything. There's a stage where you come in, you learn these basic rules, then you work on the logic, how things work together. So, for example, in science, you understand that different chemicals can combine, but first you need to know the different names of the chemicals on the chemical table. Like those are things you just need to know. These are grammar elements, basic facts. Okay, logic. How do I put together an argument? How do I analyze what someone else is saying? Can I actually understand the processes? The grammar stage can actually be applied to basically anything. So grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which is understanding how to put yourself across, like how to have a bit of flourish in the way you say things, how to use rhetorical hooks, how to
how to express yourself, how to communicate with the world, isn't it? So you learn the facts, you learn how to use those facts, and then you express what you've learned through rhetoric, don't you? That's what every politician has grown up learning, and that's why they can be so slick. They've studied right from an early age how to express themselves confidently, even though they know they're bull.
Yep. And they used to teach it in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and they used to teach it in most schools, but then it fell out of fashion, just like all of the realist art fell out of fashion. And now it's just for the public schools, just for the poshos. And I think it was Rachel came to us and she said, why don't you do this? And we looked into it vaguely before and we thought, wait a second, well, why can't we do this? This is just, it's like doing anything else. There's nothing that
there's nothing magical about it.
It doesn't need to, we don't need to do worksheets made of gold.
No.
So we can provide exactly what they get in a public school.
I mean, just the name, the trivium, you go, like, I don't know, it can scare parents, but actually it's really, really basic, simple, logical formula.
And the way that Laura teaches English as well, going through the different time periods, period by time period, and focusing each one slightly on a different writing skill, but going through the time periods chronologically, which syncs up with history. I just think it's fantastic because it means that they're immersed in it and they understand how the English language evolves. I know Mackie wasn't in when we were first learning.
You missed the start.
But she started with folklore, fairy tales, then moved on to Old English, getting the kids making their own kennings and translating Old English. So she
making their own what?
Kennings.
What's that?
So it would be when you put two words together to make another word.
Okay.
Like they did that a lot in Old English. So I don't know. Chair would be sit thing or sit back, right? So or stool back, a stool with a back, right, would be a chair. And you make lots of kennings, so they were loving that. And you don't give them all the Old English words. There's some which they can just pick out. They can start to work out how they were done, and you go and you evolve. So by the time they get to Shakespeare, They're looking at Shakespeare, and it's not that complicated.
Not scary.
It's genuinely not that scary, because you don't make them translate a whole passage of Beowulf, or you can get them to do a paragraph of Beowulf, right? But by working on this translation, it's not intimidating. They've done this before.
Yeah.
Then they get to Shakespeare, they go, Shakespeare is so, it's so familiar to them.
Yeah.
They go, oh, boom, 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 boom. And they're used to words not necessarily meaning what they currently mean today. So they go, is this? You go, actually, no, it's not. It doesn't mean that. They go, oh, wow. And then they learn from that, but because they're used to it, it's not this off-putting thing. Oh, why is that word confusing there? Why is this thing confusing here? Because you go a lot easier on them at the start. It's more fun, more playful. So when they get into it, they can just, oh man.
That's giving children context, which is really important. What I think probably we all experienced at school was nothing had context. I don't know if you felt like that. I remember just
100%. That's why all my history...
just this thing that happened. I was like, well, you know, I mean, I specifically remember doing the Second World War or without doing the First World War. You know, it was like, well, you know, reparations in Germany, why was that? You know, like, and obviously, you know, that's not even going into the agenda and how everything's twisted, but you know, I think it was the First World War. It was Archduke Ferdinand, you know, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand
of Austria-Hungary
just got shot, and then suddenly the world is at war. That was how we were introduced, and I was like, it's like one person just got shot and the whole world is at war. Can we have a bit of context? You know,
I had him doing a whole puzzle game. So every single thing in history is chronological. Every single thing, apart from, for example, I may be running through the Tudors and it's rolling into the Renaissance. And then what I do is I save the Renaissance for the end. So we've kind of run into the Renaissance, but then I need to do that as a separate topic in itself. But everything is basically chronological. I might take a theme out, leave it to the end, or have it in the middle, and we sort of edged into it. But it's so much better. When we were doing the war, I gave him a bunch of different bits of information about different countries. I had them match up the different countries, and then we drew this massive map of all of the alliances between all of the different countries. And then when you see what happens with Serbia, it's like dominoes ticking, tick, 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 tick. So they understand these wars can be unpredictable, and you can also relate it to the current day. You know, you've got the whole situation in Ukraine. Well, could that tick over? Because you've got this whole NATO alliance, and you've got this sort of informal alliance between Russia, China, Iran, Syria, and then, you know, their satellite states. Well, what could that turn into?
Well, it's interesting that I was thinking about it now. Like, we've been brought up with this education system where everything's out of context and there's no context given, and it's just these. And that's exactly how people take on the news. You know, so someone's sitting at home and they say, "Oh no, there's war in Ukraine." Everyone's been conditioned.
So Russia has invaded Ukraine, and you go, wait a second.
But
the West launched a coup.
Well, they don't say that, do they?
In Ukraine in 2014. Then this area separated, and Russia has joined a pre-existing civil war, right? Fighting against a puppet government installed by the West, right? Who you know, funded the whole coup and everything, right? They won't have that. Russia, it has to be Russia has invaded Ukraine. Well, clearly, no. Russia has joined an existing war. Have been going on for was it 8 years? It's 8 years. They joined a war. They did not start. Russia did not start a war.
Yeah. So we know that, but your average person just watching the news isn't given that context. Just like we're not given it in history lessons at school. So it seems totally normal. Yeah. You know, they go, oh, well, we don't need a context. We're never given a context for anything. So we just take it at face value.
Yeah, just accept. Like, I do like it when the kids, you know, ask me, random questions. Like, what my real thing is keeping to time, because, oh my God.
You just go off,
Yeah, like, the other day, we were doing Operation Mincemeat, where it's the whole, Nazi officer thing, and, you know, dead body, you know, water in the lungs and personal effects. And then Tommy started asking about, the flag of Corsica. And then I had to start running into like an entire history of, the Berbers and Arabs in North Africa coming over, raiding, enslaving all of the Europeans. And then but basically long rabbit hole. And I was like, okay, I need to keep this down to like 2 minutes. But I gave him like a full rundown. I said, so I'm not entirely, so I believe the flag of Corsica is yellow with a black Turk's head severed. Because they said, yes, this is what we do to you, Turk. We have your head is our symbol because we cut it off.
Right. Is that what? So what is the actual flag?
It's literally a severed head.
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, based.
Okay. I'm gonna look at that.
It's like, that's what you get for coming over here, being a pirate and taking our women off into slavery. And the men as well. Yeah, oh man. Slavery, when they learn slavery in context and they look at the Arab slave trade and they look at the fact slaves come from the word Slav and you look at, slavery throughout the whole of human history. And then suddenly they're like, well, and you go, okay, so question here. Why are there so many black people in the Americas where there are you can't find any out in Arabia? They killed them all. The Arabs killed them all. Like they castrated the men, killing most of them, and then the women they them to death, right? And if they had a child, they bashed out their brains. That's what they did. Monstrous.
Well, I lived in Sudan for 5 years. So which is
north or south?
Just 5 hours south of Khartoum. So I was north, essentially north. It wasn't the south. But so you see, like, I was naive when I went there. Wasn't expecting racism within, but obviously you've got the Arab government, and then you've got the black. They call them blue black. There's Azraq, which is like blue black, like the real dark, blue black, I don't know, and that's how they refer to them. But then the Arabs are sort of, and they take the piss out of their curly hair, So you got that within. I mean, mostly within where I was living in the village in the refugee sort of area, it was friendly, but you could see there was like an Arab, and obviously they intermarry, so you get this kind of Arab, Arab African kind of mix. So it's all very kind of nuanced, but it is really interesting. But the government are always at the Arab, the fairer skin.
Yeah,
and you don't get sort of black people in the government.
And you were not too far from Khartoum. You must have heard about the siege of Khartoum.
What do you mean the siege of Khartoum?
Siege of Khartoum. It was a great moment in history.
Oh yeah, not when I was there.
Chinese Charles Gordon fought off the Mahdi army. They were going to come in and take Egypt. He was a hero. He disobeyed commands, and they stood to the last man. And there's a great portrait of him standing there in his last. In fact, there are two different portraits of his last stand. He was an absolute hero. Chinese Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is completely off topic.
Yeah.
This is what happened.
Where I lived, they built a dam, I think it was 1918, in Sinnar is the town. And there was this incredible dam that you'd have to drive to get across the Nile. And, I was like, oh, bloody hell, it's made like 100 years ago and they built this thing. And like, how did they have the engineering skills to do this? So there's actually a lot of respect for the British. It's an interesting dynamic when you actually get there,
but they don't want to put in place the values that actually achieved that dam, which free speech, free trade.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's such a nuanced thing in history. You know.
Moving out of history, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's been happening with your court case?
Well, that's done now. So it really wasn't a big. I read the news article, the Brighton. There's a reporter called Joe Wadsworth who doxed me and put my name in the papers, and I've had this exchange backwards and forwards with her. She writes for the Brighton and Hove News, and I actually did I call it? No, I messaged her and said, look, now that I've been cleared. So essentially, I'll give a brief overview. We had a meet up on the 13th, Friday the 13th of November, 2020. It was our first indoor meeting because we'd been meeting all through lockdown at the studio in Brighton. The police came, someone grassed us up. The police came, we had 3 police women come. I had the key. I got arrested on the spot. then we got a sort of COVID breach thing through the post, and I had to plea guilty or not guilty through the post. You know, they just sent this thing like, are you guilty or not guilty? And I just wrote, I don't understand this, and just sent it back. And then they just found me guilty without a trial. So basically, for the last 3 years, I've been trying to get a fair trial.
Yeah, they never gave you a trial because
They never gave me a trial.
They have to summon you to court. They can't just find you guilty.
Yeah, they didn't do that. So that just went on, and it kept back. And then we got the bailiffs round, and we bat them off, and then they come round, and then we get another letter, and we think it had ended, and then we get another letter saying, "Oh, now you got to be in court." So we went to court, and I didn't stand in the dark. I did all the kind of common law kind of stuff, and they said, right, to get a retrial, you have to submit a statutory declaration, which is a bit like an affidavit type thing. It's mainly for people who've been out the country when they've got a speeding ticket or something, and then they have to prove that they didn't get the notification, so they want it to be reopened. So they gave me this statutory declaration, and they had it all printed out where I could just sign it. So we had a recess, and we went out and was like Googling what's a statutory declaration. I had no idea, and it said, well, the statutory declaration is basically you have this paragraph at the start and this paragraph at the end, and you can write anything you bloody like in the middle, right? So we crossed out everything else that wasn't part of what a statutory declaration has to be. Still, it was a statutory declaration because it had these important words at the beginning and end. We crossed out "I'm defendant," blah 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 blah, and I said, here's my statutory declaration, and he said, "Okay, Mr. Fern, can you read it out?" So I started reading it out, and the clerk of the court went, "No, you're not reading out what's written on the piece of paper." I said, "Well, why do I have to read out what you've written? Can you show me the law that says I have to do that?" And the magistrate said, "Mr. Fern, this is a court of law, not a place to discuss the law." So I was like, so yeah, that was it. I was going to get a T-shirt. And so they wouldn't accept my statutory declaration, even though it was perfectly valid. So we went away. I had to get my own done, which only costs £5 because it's, that they've embedded that in the law that it's only £5, which is a good thing. Anyway, went to the solicitors, got that done, handed it in. We didn't hear from them for about 6 months, 8 months. And then we got another summons, and I was like, "I've submitted a statutory declaration. I never heard from you. Why are you saying this is ongoing? I haven't been offered a trial or a fair hearing or whatever." So we went back to court, and it got the same clerk of the court. This is like about a year and a half later. It's the same guy, the clerk. And for those who don't know, the clerk of the court is really the one running the show, because the magistrates are all volunteers who have no training in law at all.
Although a lot of them are ex-solicitors.
Are they?
A fair amount.
Okay, yeah, you might be right.
But a lot of them are also sort of like snobby pseudo-politicians.
Yeah, I think that was more like it anyway. Yeah. He was running the show, and he was standing there, and he said, "Mr. Fern, you haven't." What did he say? Something like, I said, "Well, I've tried to hand in. I've submitted my statutory declaration." He said, "Well, yes, but this is a single justice procedure, and statutory declarations aren't applicable in this case." And I stood there for a minute. I was like, that was a real curveball. I was like, now what do I just standing there? And then I thought, hang on a minute. And I said, "But you asked me to submit a statutory declaration the last time I was in court because you're the same guy." And he went, "Yes, you're correct. Yes, I'm sorry about that." And from that moment on, he was completely flummoxed. And he went out. He said, "I'm going to have to go out the room for 10 minutes." And he went out the room, and he was faffing about. I didn't know what. And all the magistrates are sitting there, and they're like chatting amongst themselves, like whispering. He came back after about half an hour. So he turned to the magistrates and he said, "Are we okay to reopen the case then?" So they said, yeah. And so we fixed a date. We went back 3 weeks later. We were waiting outside, and someone came out and said, "You can go in the courtroom if you want, but just to let you know, they've dropped everything. And CPS have decided it's not in the public interest to pursue it anymore." So I was like, okay. And I was going to leave, and I thought, no, actually, I'll go in. She said, "Well, you can go in." And so we went in and heard it from the magistrates, from the horse's mouth. And they said, yeah, it's just they decided it wasn't in the public interest. So that was done and dusted. So we just held on, basically. Just sort of, it wasn't when I read it all in this article, she did a summary of it in the end, and it does sound quite interesting, but it was drawn out over 4 years, and it was just nothing. It was comical. It was stupid. Having said that, Mackie was 7 when it first happened, and the police were coming around, trying to hand us these kind of court summons, or not a summons, but I'm not sure what they were putting through the door. But they were coming around like it was winter and it was like 8 o'clock and it was dark, and for a lot of people that would have been really intimidating, and they did that a couple of times, trying to hand us the papers,
You should have put a cold bucket of water on top
that
of
would
the
have been a
porch
good
door,
idea.
and then as they open the porch, oh my God, that would satisfy me no end.
Well, one of them was a PCSO who we'd had a run-in with during lockdown because we'd been at the bandstand in Brighton, the Peace statue, and she'd come along and she's like, "Come on, people, keep moving," and we're all sitting around because that was then when you couldn't sit still. You had to be exercising or something. It was right in the middle of lockdown.
Little Nazi Karens.
Yeah, and she came and she said, "Come on, keep moving, everyone." So we all started dancing and we were all like going, "Gotta keep on moving," and doing all this kind of thing and like dancing and then just sitting down again. And she got really sort of pissed off. Anyway, she was one of the women who came and delivered this paper, and we recognised her just as she was walking off and getting back in the car. So I was like, "Open the door. Keep on moving!" like this. I don't know what she must have heard, but we didn't get any response. But that was quite amusing. So, better than a bucket of water over the head, actually.
I'd still go for the bucket of
both
water.
Would have been good, but she must have been quite.
So you've done a little bit of singing for us. Do you want to talk a little bit about you being in Victorious?
Yeah, Victorious was so when we were meeting up all through lockdown. We started off with a homeschool group, right at the start. There's a few people in Brighton who kind of were like a hub, who we kind of knew through the kind of conspiracy sort of movement circles, and we were connected on Facebook. And we started meeting up, and we were meeting up every Friday, and we were doing a bit of homeschooling. We took a tent, and we had a little mini festival every Friday in the park, which was lovely, and that sort of got bigger and bigger. And then Caroline from the band started bringing her guitar and songbooks and stuff. And just for a laugh, we started changing the words for the songs. And that just grew and grew. So we had loads of different people come and go, and then it just sort of narrowed down to a sort of core group. And Caroline bought a little PA thing, and then it was like one step up, and then we did a gig in that November around the time of the COVID breach incident thing. I think it was October. It was around just before, actually. And that was magic. It was magic because everyone had been going through lockdown, and we'd all been meeting up, and we'd created this kind of social group, a really quite a strong social group of maybe like 50, 60, 70, 100 people. And this was the big event that everyone came together, and it was like 20 odd years of being in bands, and then suddenly it was like, wow, this is what it's all about. It didn't have to sort of feel like you were trying to convert anyone, say anything clever. It was just like everyone was on the same page, everyone was dancing, everyone was just so relieved to be in an environment where they could just have a big party with people and that was really, it was just a real key, pivotal, beautiful sort of moment. And then we've just sort of carried on sort of playing the festivals and stuff, and we do gigs in Brighton on the seafront. We just take the gear down and set it up, and just have fun. I think people, so we do mainly covers. It was still stuck on that initial thing where we just changed the words to take the piss, so we do Psycho Killer, the Talking Heads, where we and we change all the words.
Dedicated to Bill Gates.
Yeah, and the whole lot of them. Conditioned Minds, Elvis cover, where what's the original? Suspicious Minds. So used to doing it. Conditioned Minds. So we, about a relationship. One of them is awake, one of them's not. Where do you go from here? Kind of thing. All that kind of. There's a load of them. And then we do our own. We've sort of done our own stuff as well. I mean, I've written stuff, and Hayes has written stuff. So we've been in bands for like 20, 30 years, and then this was just like fun. And it was, actually, it was quite an interesting thing because we went from that, a few of us had been in bands in that kind of like serious Brighton, and you wanted to make it and you wanted to be that thing. We never got anywhere. But that kind of suddenly doing a completely different perspective, and just, it was like a community sort of band thing, and it was a real lovely.
Healthy.
I can just drop that and just enjoy doing music, just for the fun of it, rather than trying to. In Brighton, it's quite. You can imagine.
You are the band of Brighton.
Oh, no. Well, no, I mean, going back, like being in bands where you're trying to be the cool this, that, and there's, there's other bands.
Brighton's a pit of degeneracy.
Oh God, and it's the stress. It's and to just do it for fun was a really lovely thing. And now Vicky's playing trumpet as like family. Fern is family. She plays congas, and so yeah, it's lovely. It feels like a big family. There's about 10 of us in the band. Although some people are leaving, so if anyone's interested in joining, backing singers and bass players required, and anything else.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, what day are you performing now?
We're doing the wedding. We're doing the first dance, and then we're doing our set after the wedding, which is Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Jess and Davey's wedding.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I thought you said Chaz and Dave's wedding. Then I was like, it's not Chaz and Dave's wedding.
So where can people find? You're basically a polymath now. You're doing art, music, law.
I'm not very good at maths.
And now you're doing journalism as well.
Yeah.
So you can't be stopped. You're a polymath. You're doing everything.
Yeah.
You're going to lots of places. So where can people find you on all your different things?
Well, luckily my name's not that common. So if you Google my name, Jake Fern, Fern, like the plant.
I'm going to stop you there. Don't use Google.
Sorry.
Use Brave or at minimum DuckDuckGo. Come on. Principles. Don't use Google.
Yeah. So if you Google Jake Fern, no, whatever you want to do. If you put my name in a search engine, you pretty much will find like my website or any kind of contact. Yeah. Jake Fern. JakeFern.
Beautiful. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, hit the notification button if you would like to help. We've got a Patreon and a Subscribe Star. So please head on over there and pledge us some support if you want to keep this journalism going. We've got a professional studio here and we could do with your support to keep these great conversations coming.